And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. As famine and drought grip Somalia in what's being called the worst humanitarian disaster in the world right now, The Nation magazine has revealed the CIA is greatly expanding its covert operations inside Somalia. Following an in-depth, on-the-ground investigation inside Mogadishu, the magazine revealed the agency has set up a secret counterterrorism training base at the international airport in Somalia, where it's training an indigenous Somali force to conduct targeted combat and capture operations against members of al-Shabaab, the militant group with close ties to al-Qaeda. The Nation has also revealed the CIA is using a secret underground prison in the basement of Somalia's National Security Agency. While a U.S. official told the Nation that the CIA does not run the prison, he acknowledged the CIA pays the salaries of Somali agents. Some of the prisoners in the prison have been snatched on the streets of Nairobi, Kenya, and rendered to Mogadishu. The revelations come as the Joint Special Operations Command, known as JSOC, has increased its targeted killing operations inside Somalia. On June 23rd, JSOC forces targeted an alleged Shabaab convoy and then landed inside Somalia to collect the bodies. We're joined now by Jeremy Scahill, the national security correspondent for The Nation magazine. He's just returned from Mogadishu, Somalia. He's a longtime Democracy Now! Correspondent. His story in this week's Nation magazine is called The CIA's Secret Sites in Somalia. Jeremy, talk about what you found in Somalia.
Well, I traveled to Somalia with Rick Rowley from Big Noise Films, who's a filmmaker, and we were there for about 10 days. And we were investigating the institution of targeted killing that is increasingly present in the U.S. national security strategy, particularly under President Obama. And when we arrived in Mogadishu within days, we discovered that the CIA had just finished construction of a pretty massive compound at the Adenade International Airport in Mogadishu. And the compound, which is not even hidden in plain sight, it's just in plain sight, looks like a gated community. It has about a dozen buildings inside of it, brand new. It's a walled compound with guard posts at each of its four corners. It's right on the banks of the Indian Ocean, and then next to it there are 6 or 8 small hangars, and the CIA also has its own aircraft there. I was able to track down a senior Somali intelligence official and began the process of investigating this facility. And what I discovered is that the CIA is training what was described to me as an indigenous strike force, members of Somalia's National Security Agency, its intelligence division, to conduct operations in the areas controlled by the Shabaab in Mogadishu. And you know, the situation is very fluid, but the Shabaab control a huge portion of Mogadishu, and the internationally recognized government controls about 30 square miles of territory. When I asked a very prominent businessman who works in the port of Mogadishu who controls the rest, he said the Shabaab government, and referred to it as such. And everyone says that if the 9,000 troops from Uganda and Burundi that are there as part of the African Union were to pull out, that the Shabaab would take over in minutes, if not seconds. And so we discovered that the CIA was expanding its operations there. But then I also met a man who claimed that he had been held in an underground prison in the basement of the National Security Agency, which is one of the facilities where the CIA has its personnel, and it's literally behind the presidential palace in Villa Somalia, which is the semi-fortified area where Somalia's transitional federal government, the U.S.-backed government, is based. And he described to me that he had seen prisoners inside of this and talked to prisoners inside of this basement dungeon who had been there for 18 months or more. There were people that he described as young boys inside the prison, old men, described infestation of bed bugs and mosquitoes, no windows. Prisoners are never allowed to see the light of day, and people are literally going crazy in the basement of this prison. And he said that he had seen both U.S. and French agents, white men, interrogating prisoners, and that some of the prisoners claimed that they had been snatched in neighboring Kenya and rendered to Somalia. And so I started that investigation, and more sources came forward when I was in Mogadishu to describe this and confirmed that that CIA personnel and possibly U.S. military intelligence personnel are interrogating prisoners held in that basement facility. We found one man in particular, the case of one man in particular named Ahmed Abdullahi Hassan, who was a 25 or 26-year-old Kenyan of Somali descent, but he's a Kenyan citizen, who was snatched from his home in July of 2009. And his lawyers allege that he was rendered to Somalia, and they said that it had all the hallmarks of a U.S. rendition. So I investigated that case, and what I learned, and in fact I can't say where the U.S. official worked because they wouldn't allow us to report it, but let's just say a U.S. official very familiar with these operations acknowledged the case of Ahmed Abdullahi Hassan, said to me directly the U.S. did not render him. And I said, well, we're not alleging that the U.S. rendered him. We're alleging that the Kenyans rendered him. You have to understand, in 2007 alone, the Kenyans rendered 85 Somalis, or excuse me, 85 people from Kenya to Somalia on behalf of the U.S. and other governments, including Ethiopia. So there is a long pattern here of the U.S. using proxy forces such as the Kenyans to do these renditions. So the U.S. doesn't have to put them on the plane itself. But the U.S. official acknowledged that the U.S. provided the Kenyans with the intelligence that led to Hassan, quote, being taken off the streets. So the U.S. is playing semantics with this. It's clear that they made it abundantly clear they wanted him removed from the game, and he was swiftly abducted, hooded, taken to Wilson Airport, and then rendered to Mogadishu. This man was identified in an intelligence report that's believed to be a U.S. intelligence report that was leaked by Kenya's anti-terrorism police unit. He was identified as the right-hand man of Ali Nabhan, who was one of the most wanted suspects regarding East Africa that the U.S. was pursuing. He was wanted for questioning over his alleged connection to the 2002 bombings in Kenya that targeted a hotel and an Israeli aircraft that was parked at the airport in Mombasa. 2 months after Hassan was snatched off the streets of Kenya, President Obama authorized his first targeted killing in Somalia and killed Ali Nabhan, the man that Hassan was allegedly the right-hand man to. So the U.S. role in that case seems very, very clear. As far as the interrogations go inside of this basement prison, the U.S. official that was made available to me for this story said that the U.S. does not directly interrogate prisoners. We jointly debrief suspects with Somali agents present. Again, it's all a semantic game. And insisted that it's only happened a few times in the past year.
What is the significance of this?
In January of 2009, President Obama signed a series of executive orders that were intended to end the practices that President Bush and Vice President Cheney had implemented in the war on terror that candidate Obama had denounced on the campaign trail: torture, secret prisons, renditions. And CIA Director Leon Panetta said in April of 2009 that the U.S. was in the process of decommissioning all of its secret prison sites. 2 months later, Hassan is rendered to a secret prison in Somalia.
Is it your sense that, for example, the ICRC, the International Red Cross, knows about this, is going in and visiting the prisoners?
There's no Red Cross in Mogadishu. There's no one in Mogadishu. There's no aid agencies. No one will go there. Prison visits? No. There's not even a food distribution program that has any Westerners on the ground. They just all of the white Westerners are hiding inside of AMISOM's compound, the African Union compound, and Mogadishu is left to suffer completely. It is the most horrifying scene I've ever seen in my life. The prisoners held there, not only do they not see the Red Cross, they are not ever presented with charges. There is no court system to speak of at all in Mogadishu. And the U.S. can talk until it's blue in the face about how this isn't a secret U.S. prison, and at the same time confirm that they pay the salaries of the people that run those prisons and are running Somalia's intelligence. It was described to me how the CIA does not trust the Somali government, which is regularly denounced by the U.S. as corrupt and unable to control its own territory. So they literally every month, the CIA lines up the Somali agents and pays them $200 in cash. So how is it that you can say, this isn't our secret prison, we're just there, and the CNN gets spun by the CIA yesterday after my story comes out, and they say, well, the Somalis assure us that they're treating the prisoners humanely. You're paying their salaries. That is using that site at a minimum.
Jeremy Scahill, you write the CIA presence in Mogadishu is part of Washington's intensifying counterterrorism focus on Somalia, which includes targeted strikes by U.S. Special Operations Forces, drone attacks, and expanded surveillance operations.
Right. Well, as I said, President Obama has made Somalia and Yemen major focus points of his continuation of the Bush-era doctrine that the world is a battlefield and we have the right to kill anyone that we deem to be a terrorist at any time that we want in any country around the world. Started his targeted killing operation authorizations, as far as we know, in September of 2009. And just in the past month, there have been a number of U.S. strikes inside of Somalia. There was the June 23rd strike that you mentioned, where strikes were conducted against a convoy that allegedly was headed by Shabab members, and then JSOC forces land on the ground and collect the bodies. They did the same thing with the Ali Nabhan hit in 2009. JSOC landed inside the country and took his body for verification. Then that it was him. Then on July 6th, there were 3 more U.S. strikes in another area of Somalia called Kismayo, which is about 300 miles away from Mogadishu. And you have, I also was told by a very senior Somali official, and I'm going to be writing about this in the coming weeks, that JSOC actually has forces on the ground that are directly targeting Shabab, not just flying in and hitting them, but actually on the ground conducting operations. But I have to say, though, that while we can talk about the expanded presence of the CIA and this counterterrorism program, as far as the Somali agents are concerned, it's been a tremendous failure. The only time that they've attempted a targeted operation inside of a Shabab-controlled area in Mogadishu was late last year. And it was described to me as a categorical disaster where the Somali agents were killed, and they haven't tried another operation since. So I think that the CIA is certainly operating in what is perhaps the most dangerous and unstable environment that it operates in, and we're clearly increasing the amount we're spending on it and the amount of personnel that we're allocating to it, but to what effect is really unclear.
Jeremy, AP reported this. A federal judge reacted skeptically to the Obama administration's request to dismiss a lawsuit by an American citizen who says he was held in Africa for 4 months and allegedly interrogated more than 30 times by U.S. officials. Amir Mohammed Mashal, a Muslim man living in Tinton Falls, New Jersey, said he was subjected to unlawful rendition from Kenya to Somalia and Ethiopia, carried out at the behest of U.S. officials.
Right. If that case is from 2007, the story there was that the United States backed a Ethiopian invasion of Somalia to unseat a coalition of groups that called themselves the Islamic Courts Union that had taken control of Mogadishu, defeating the CIA's warlords who operated effectively as a death squad. And they brought some semblance of order to Mogadishu. They were ruthless, but they brought order to Mogadishu and were widely seen as the sort of most stable people that had taken power since the regime of Siad Barre was brought down in 1991, and then the Black Hawk Down incident happened. And the U.S., of course, took a position under the Bush administration that an Islamic government was not acceptable, and they backed an Ethiopian invasion, and then JSOC went in and also did targeted killing operations. So many Somalis began to flee the Ethiopian invasion, and the Kenyans in particular, along with the Ethiopians, started just mass renditions, where they were snatching people off the streets and then sending them to either Mogadishu or another area of Somalia where there was a secret prison called Baidoa. I interviewed a former Islamic warlord who JSOC tried to kill in 2007. He was then abducted by Americans inside of Somalia and rendered to Ethiopia and held by the Ethiopians for 2 years. Despite the fact that the U.S. backed this invasion that really radically worsened the situation, the current president of Somalia, Sheikh Ahmed, is a former leader of the Islamic Courts Union, and he now is backed by the United States. So it all comes full circle, and U.S. policy has, if anything, strengthened the role of al-Shabaab, who they were minor players within this Islamic Courts Union. the U.S. and Ethiopian response made them the premier militants on the block.
We're going to go to break, then come back and also talk about the famine that is engulfing Somalia, the drought. Jeremy Scahill with us. The CIA's secret sites in Somalia is his expose in The Nation magazine this week. Stay with us.